Okay, somehow we are done with the trunk itself, and it's time to add the branches. So select the trunk, because if you do not select it, it's going to stick to this tree zone, which we really do not want. So selecting this trunk, we go for add, and we're going to add a branch. And now the mode is set to absolute. We want to change this. And one of the most important steps when creating a tree is selecting this generation mode. Because if you select this one right, you will save yourself a lot of trouble down the road. So for this one, we're going to use interval, because this interval is common and actually one of the most common modes that you're going to create trees with in a speed tree, because it's going to spawn these as groups, and all of these children that you see here are groups. And if you look at the references that we have, you see the branches have been grouped together, and although they have a bit of distance, but they are somehow grouped together, spinning around the bark of the tree. And it's more obvious if you look at these drawings in here. You see the branches are in groups. Of course, it's naturally expected that the groups are a bit offsetted from each other, but the whole essence is the groups that this interval allows us to create. So let's go and try to manipulate these branches. And right off, we can tell that the size of the branches isn't something that we see in references. And the first thing to do is going in here and into this extend parent, let's hit it to any, so that it adds one extra branch to cap this off. And if I set it to none, you see this has been cut off. But if I set it to any, it's going to add one of these branches to that cap and cap it for us. Okay, one of the most important parameters to set when we select interval is setting this first and last, because the groups are going to be spawned between this boundary, as you see here. And by looking at references, we see that we have a bit of a space in here, a bit of empty space, which really is so empty. And we have the branches all the way to the top. And we can really make this happen by bringing this top one up. Let me make this 0.98. And when I'm comparing it against the size of this human, I can tell that the branches need to come down just a bit. So let's select the branches, and the first, let's bring it not so much, let's go for 0.1. No, this is too much. Let's go for 0.1 and a half, 0.2. And this old school 0.2 is going to be a good value for us. And also we're seeing a lot of the branches in here, which we really do not want. And the branching system in pine trees is really lighter than what we have here. And we need to decrease from the size of the branches and the numbers as well. So let's go for frequency and make this halfened. And this is good. I'm happy with the number that we have here. And we need to randomize them a bit more. Right now, the branches, the groups are so close together. So let's go for a spread and try to randomize it just a bit, and go even further and try to add a variance into here, add a variance value, so that the randomization, excuse me, I'm manipulating the spiral. Let's go for this one and try to add a bit of variance. Let's increase it more so that the distribution of the branches is a little bit more randomized and natural. And let's look about from the top, or you can go to this menu and exactly look from the orthographic view. And let's make the spiral just a bit, and of course try to add a bit of randomization in that, so that the tree is full in all sides. Okay, this is something good. And let's go back to the perspective view. So I'm happy with these settings that we have for generation. And now let's go for a spine, and right off we should decrease the length that we have. Okay, for a better randomization, I really do not use the absolute here. Of course you can use the absolute, but since we are going to make them a smaller, this absolute value acts as a minimum, and the minimum is 0, and we can do nothing to that because it's not going in. Of course it's only trying to make the minimum bigger, so we're going to change the number depending on the size of the actual parent, and the parent is being this trunk, which this one has been selected and attached to. So let's first name this one level 1b for level 1 branches, and tries to decrease the size just a bit. So now we're getting there, and this is more like the pine tree that we know. Okay, now let's look at the reference images that we have to see the size of the branches in the images themselves. So let's bring this up, and you see, because this is a cone shape, the branches are medium down the bottom and get bigger in the medium parts in the halfway of the tree, and get a slightly smaller towards a triangular shape as they go to the top. So we're going to create this shape as you see it here, and you can see that right here as well. The branches are medium sized down the bottom, get bigger, and then get a smaller to create a cone shape. And we're going to do that using this parent system. And let's go for draw, and first let's set it to max so that we can see the boundaries here. This is from 0 to 1 and from bottom to top, and I'm going to create a cone shape here. So let's set it. We are going there, and let's look at it, and really this is something good. Or we can try another time. Let's hit the draw and start medium here, go really absolute high in here, and then go down in here. And this is good, but we need to increase the size of the branches because the branches need to be bigger just a bit, not so much. 0.2 is going to be a reasonable value, and right away you can see the cone shape that it has created for us. And there's something to fix, and that is here it goes up. So let's deactivate this, take this one and delete it, or take this one and delete it, and bring this one down so that the branches up top get a smaller. Okay, something like this is a lot better. And now I want to make them all rotate and to have a bit more fullness when we look at different sizes and different angles. So let's go to top view and go to generation mode, and for the spiral let's manipulate, or even better, let's bring the variance down just a bit. And now let's look at it from this side, and looks like we're getting a good value there. And of course there's a bit of more randomization in the branches, and I really do not want that. Let's go for spine tab, and in here there's a bit of randomization. The whole value is 0.2 and we have 0.13 randomization, which is a lot. So let's bring this down. Okay, this is more like it. Now we have less randomization, and the branch distribution and the branch size is creating that cone shape for us. You can read that from here. And the next thing that we're going to manipulate is the start angle. So let's look at the references, and you see the starting angle points down the bottom and gets planar to the ground in the middle and goes up on top of the tree. So we have a couple of variations. going from a negative starting angle to planar to positive. So let's go and create. So you can do something, you can make them all flat and start to manipulate this, or you can start from the value that it gives you. Let me go back to this default value and start to manipulate this to get the angles that you want. So let's create a checkpoint in here and bring it right here. And for these bottom branches, I really want them to point down. So I'm going to take this checkpoint and bring this up. Let me bring this up. You can of course go beyond this value. This is the 0 to 1, and you can really go beyond this value. I'm going to make this one point down. Let's bring it up more. And let's create a checkpoint in here. And I want these center ones to stay flat. So let's make them. Let's take these two and bring it up to make them flatter. And bring this one down to make these ones point towards the sky. So something like this is okay. Now we have the profile, and now let's make this something like this, and instead bring these ones up. Okay, something like this is really reasonable. And of course we're going to add a lot of noise into these to make these more natural, not so CG looking and flat. So let's select these branches and try to manipulate them with the slider that we have. So let's see the noise. Yeah, this one is the noise. And try to, if you drag this to the right, you are getting very, very flat things. And we do not want that. So let's make this a bit noisy, but reasonable. So check and inspect from all sides. And let's look at the references to see what we grabbed from. And there are a lot of broken branches in here. You see, these are broken branches that we see there. So we're going to create them as well. So let's go here, and for the broken branches, you know the rule. You should go for this brick and increase the chance of brick to something like this. And let's increase the chance. And if you remember from looking at the references, you see broken branches are more down the bottom. And we have more broken branches when the tree is closer to the ground. So let's go for the effect, because now we are getting broken branches in these parts, which I really do not want. I want these to hold the leaves for us. So let's take here, and we want the most of the broken branches in the beginning. So take this one and create a checkpoint. And bring this back. We want the broken branches to be in this range. And I'm going to create another checkpoint and bring it all the way down. Okay, something like this. So that we have a lot of branches top and more broken branches down the bottom. So let's bring this up, or try to increase the broken branches chances. So you see we have some broken branches down the bottom, and the branches up top are staying untouched. And the next value is going to be the spot, which is going to determine the size of the broken branches themselves. So let's make it shorter. Something like this is good for the broken branches. And of course it would be a great idea if we add another layer of broken branches in the middle of these, so that the size varies so much. So I'm going to do one thing to make this more realistic. I want the branches that are closer to the ground to be shorter. So let's go for this spot And these branches are these. So I'm going to make these shorter. Something like this. These branches are shorter. Of course, we are seeing this because of this variance value. So let's make this one 0. And now try to add a bit of variance in here. So this is good. And there's something more that I can do, and it's checking the frequency and the size to make the cone shape more prominent. So let's add another one. And this is good. This is getting good. I added another layer of branches, and it filled a lot of the empty areas that we had. So now it's getting more like the pine tree. And now I feel like we can add those layers of broken branches to make this even more beautiful. So again, as always, add the branches, select the trunk as the parent, and add a branch. Or let's take this one, delete it, and use one of the presets that has a lot of branches, like these little branches, which is good, but not so good because, yeah, they are good. So let's go and bring the length down, make them smaller, and let's try to turn them on and off to see the effect that they have on the tree. And rename this to broken branches. And let's go to the generation settings in here, and I'm going to bring the first down, something like 0.1 or 0.05, okay, so that we have some broken branches in here. And of course we're going to make them smaller. And for the last also, let me select it to see the distribution, and I'm going to bring the last down because I really do not want to have broken branches up there. So this is good. And now let's go to a spine, and down the bottom in here we want to make the break chance a lot higher and bring the break spot down to something like this, okay? And I'm going to add a bit of noise into these. Let's select them. And try to add just a bit of gravity and a bit of noise to make them more randomized and more broken. And I want to make the start angle pointing down. So let's go and see the start angle. It's up here, and I want them to point down because these broken branches are already pointing down in references. And let's make the size smaller to something like this. And I need to bring this one down so that the size of the branches do not vary so much. And if you see these big branches, let me hide here. And if you see these big branches, it's because of this profile that we added. Let's select this and bring this in. Take this one, and this is good for the big branch, for broken branches. And I'm going to go to the skin tab and bring the radius down just a bit. Not for these, for the broken branches. Let's bring the radius down, okay, to something like this. And let's go to the segments in here for these level 1 branches, and I'm going to make the segments higher. So let's bring the script mode, and we want to see a lot more segments in here. So let's try to add the absolute value and bring the relative up also, and bring the radial, and I really do not want so much. Let's bring this down. This is too much. And try to make it something like this, a bit more optimized. So let's take these as well, and I'm going to add a bit of resolution into these as well to make them look a bit more beautiful. So let's add segments, relative, and a bit of radial as well to make them sync more with the rest of the geometry that we have in there. So let's go to standard mode, and we are seeing more definition in the branches. So let's take these, and because these are really aligning too much with themselves, I'm going to go to the generation, and because this is interval, I'm going to make the spread and bring it up just a bit so that they're not aligning so perfectly and have a bit of randomization and realisticness to them. And let's change the spiral as well and bring a bit of variance into the mix. So let's go for the first, and for the first I'm going to set it to 0.1 so that it deletes these unwanted branches that we have there. I feel like we are reaching to the end of this lesson, and one thing more that I'm going to do, and I always do, is selecting this trunk and go into the displacement tab and copy the displacement. You simply right click in here and go into the generator that you want to paste the displacement in, and simply right click here and paste. And I'm going to do some changes in here, and one of them is making these less intensive. For example, I really do not want a lot of noise in here, so I'm going to make it really subtle, but something that reads with the rest of the tree. So you see here we have a lot of the fine noise, which I can really turn off. But now it's really too CG. So let's add just a bit of fine noise and then increase the scale. I mean decrease it. And I'm going to set this one to max. And this one as well, set it to 0. And now just increase the scale a little bit to give it a bit of undulation in the branches. So this is the branches, and for the flare, let me see what the flare does, and the flare is doing the job perfectly. Now let me copy the displacement from this branch and copy the displacement into this branch, these broken branches, and it's doing all right. So I feel like we have done enough for this lesson. And in the next lesson, we will build upon the tree and try to manipulate it even more. So see you in the next lesson.